I'm going to need this, but Martin gave it to me because I'm going to use an overhead just to illustrate. And I made this pointer this afternoon. Actually, that's my wife's craft item here. All right.
Is that from the tree in your swale?
Well, yeah, anyway. All right, you go over the white paper. I'm not going to go over the white paper. I want to make a couple of key points. And first I want to apologize because when I went into writing this white paper, I didn't realize what I didn't know about density, to be honest with you. And I think I learned as much writing this paper, interviewing the city manager, the growth management director, the head of the planning board, and Dr. Trotter. So I got a lot of information from those folks that I wanted to put into a revised paper, but let's do it tonight and we'll go from there. A couple of quick points. Total density. When I first was looking at total density, I thought you multiply 4 miles by 6, you get 24 square miles, and you figure it out and you divide it by the number of acres, and that's your density. Well, that's not true, because only 50% of those 24 square miles are buildable and actually count in the density. So when you're looking at density, if you look at this chart,
I've got the chart.
if you look at the chart and you look at the very end of the chart down here, you'll see that 6,883 acres. Well, that's really based on about 10 square miles, 10.7 square miles, which is the buildable acreage. So density is really condensed. You know, that 24 square miles, that counts water, it counts public buildings, it counts wetlands. So I think that's one misconception that I had that probably a lot of citizens have. And of those 6,883 acres, there are 22,775 available dwelling units, okay? And when you're talking about density, you're really talking about dwelling units, which is another thing that they're kind of used interchangeably, but density is really a reflection of the number of dwelling units. I just wanted to kind of show another thing, and I want to switch charts. I think we can leave this up. A lot of people assume that most of the density on the island and some of the problems associated with density and intensity are due to commercial development. And this arrow points to the very small area of our island, which is commercial development. Most of the density in our island comes from our residential development. If you were to look at the density units, the commercial density represents only 15% of the total density. I want to show you that. Go back to this chart. So this is the density chart by land use category right here. And all of these land use categories are commercial. When you add them all up, it comes out to 3,242 dwelling units, or density, if you want to use them interchangeably, out of the total of 22,775. And that's a point I really want to make because, again, the major density that we are facing right now on Marco Island is coming from just build out. We had all of those lots that were vacant for years and years, and people got used to having, vacant lots on their street and the fewer cars associated with that. Well, now all those lots are building out, and normally, you're going to get more people and more cars, and it's going to seem like we're more dense, but there's no additional density that's been added. It's just filling out, taking the allowable density that people were allowed to build on and building on it. So that was just another point I wanted to make. Now, let's go back to this table. Okay, so if you look at the, Mark, can you just jack this up a little bit, blow it up a little bit? No, go the other way. Make it larger. Larger, larger. Okay, stop. All right, so the name of this table is residential density limitations. Really what that means is allowable residential homes, apartments, and hotel rooms. So if you look at the 22,775, essentially what that's saying is you can build on Marco Island 22,775 homes, apartments, or hotel rooms. It's really a composite of all the different kinds of dwellings. All right. So what was especially confusing to me when I first started was that total density allowed in the commercial zones, I thought it referred to the number of commercial buildings that are allowed, but it really isn't. The total density allowed in the commercial zones really refers to the number of allowable residential units within those commercial buildings. So the point I want to make, in other words, every time a business person builds a restaurant or an ice cream parlor or a real estate office, they're not adding any density to the island. They're adding zero density to the island because there are no dwelling units associated with those kinds of businesses. And again, it annoys me to hear people criticize our business development because they assume that that business development is contributing to our density, and in most cases it isn't. The only time commercial development contributes to density is when it includes residential units such as mixed-use projects, hotel, motel, or timeshare, or in the most recent case, the affordable housing. And that's really how this came up within the context of the planning board. In Mary's discussion of affordable housing, a couple of planning board members wanted to know, within that commercial zone where they're proposing this, how much allowable density is there? And, you know, we really couldn't come up with an answer right at that moment. But I just want to make a point that when you really look at allowable density, and you look at those 3,242 units in the commercial zones, I guarantee you there's not more than 1,000 of those units have been built upon. Remember, that's a total number allowed. But I think Councilor Irwin was referring to the point. If you look at, you know, how many strip malls have actual residences on the second floor, how many multi-use developments are there? You know, with the exception of the Esplanade and the other one on Park Place, there are very few that have taken advantage of those allowable units. So, you know, so once again, I think there's plenty of room for affordable housing and other residential use in the commercial zones because so much of it has yet to be used. And I think, you know, part of Dr. Trotter's request is to really get an accurate tally of that. And we had an honest discussion. I said, you know, I'm pro-business. I support development. And I know that he's a little more conservative and is concerned about overdevelopment and misuse of density. And I said, but I think we need to work together. What we really need is an honest count of how much density in the different zones has been used and is available. And that's what he was trying to get to, is how do we go about and actually do that? And, you know, I think in the residential zones, it'll be real easy. I mean, I could get two people and spend a week and drive by street and just say, and look at Google Maps and look at the different plots and say, this one has a house on it, this one doesn't, and count them up. And I bet you we could knock out available residential density in a week. But when you get to commercial, it's a little more difficult, right? Because of the mixed-use projects, and you have, you know, certain, what's the word I'm looking for? Changes that were allowed, you know, by zone. But I think it could be done. And I just want one more point. I want to make, this was an interesting point that he brought up. And it refers to this chart. I think this chart is inaccurate. I think these numbers, the 462 and the 0, are in the wrong places. Because if you look over, the 462 is on the line of heavy commercial development, and the 0 is on town center mixed use. There's no allowable residential dwelling units in the heavy commercial zone. If you go into the land development code and the comprehensive plan, it says no residential units shall be built in the heavy commercial. So where the hell did these 462 units, come from? And again, I think it might have been a clerical error years ago when this chart was put together, because it makes more sense that those 432 probably belong in the town center, and this 0 probably belongs up there. So I think there are some things that some questions that need to be answered, and I think it's a legitimate endeavor. I talked to members of the planning board.
Councilor B'Elanna, sorry to interrupt, but we really do need a motion now, so to extend. Can we get a motion to extend for 10 minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
all right.
Opposed? Opposed?
So I'll wrap up in
All right,
5 minutes.
Unanimous, 10 minutes.
I'll wrap up in 5 minutes.
How
So,
about 3
Fast,
minutes?
yeah, because we got to get through these other.
so the
couple.
point is, I think his request to get this tally makes sense. I think it could be done, and I was talking to the assistant city manager about what's the best way to do this. Dr. Trotter suggested that we form a small group, himself, myself, Dan, and a couple of people. And I said, you know, it's got to be in the sunshine. It's got to be done in the right way. And Assistant City Manager Dr. Lucius said, maybe this could be one of the charges for the new Business Development and Redevelopment Committee. It seems like this would be something that would be right up their alley, and I'm going to help them get their goals set up in their initial meeting. So if you would agree to that as the next step, let me bring this before them and have them work on it. Makes sense?
I've got no issue with that, but,
I got one quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
and then we'll see if we have consensus.
I don't think you have to drive the neighborhoods to get this information.
I was just being
I,
facetious.
I think this information is contained in our computer systems, either through the fire department or through the building department.
To be honest with you, I'm a little leery about putting an extra load on growth management. They've got some major projects coming up, but I agree with you.
It's there,
Okay.
and that's why we have it, so we can retrieve it.
I would be willing to go out in my car and count them, though, if that's what it comes down to.
There's a beautiful map at the Historical Museum right at the entrance that has every single house and every single
Right,
lot
right.
on it.
If you're working on this, do one favor. Update this map.
Yes.
It's we are charged to change the comprehensive plan every time there's a zoning change. So when, for example, the property across the street went from C1 to PUD, we need to change the map,
Yeah.
and we don't do it.
Okay. I will bring
I
that to
got
the committee.
one comment. Can I jump in real quick?
Yep.
Sorry. Appreciate the work you did for the advisory committees. Appreciate the liaison position. I think you're suited for this. The highlights, they don't need the whole goal. Keep the goal simple, not the college professor. I say that respectfully.
I got my pointer.
Get right to the number and let's tackle it. So appreciate you taking it on.
Okay,
All right,
thanks.
so I don't hear any objection to the committee taking a look at that as
All
one
right.
of their potential charges. So,
Great. Thanks for your time.
thanks, Councilor Valana.